The 1990s was not a good decade for the Avengers. Now, don't take this to mean that the Avengers was somehow getting streamlined down into one book. Far from it. I mean, this was the era when Spider-Man had 4 books, and the X-Men, if you include the solo titles, had about 8. So no, we would actually be getting yet another Avengers team. One that technically was not an Avengers team. Ah yes, the proactive super team, the group of heroes that works to put the fires out before they even start. Look, ForceWorks was not exactly the first nor the last book to try to tackle this premise. And really, we don't have enough time to get into why this happens, but every time someone tries to do this type of book, it falls flat on its face. We'll take a look at certain aspects of Iron Man and the Scarlet Witch a little later on in the book, but for now, let's take a look at some of the other superhero members of this team. Also, you probably noticed that Julia's costume looks eerily similar to the black symbiote costume that Spider-Man wore. And there's sort of a reason for this. Now, Julia's outfit is just an outfit. It's not a living creature or anything of that nature. However, she did appear in the Marvel Superhero Secret Wars series where Spidey first gained that outfit. And it's believed that because he had seen Julia in that outfit, it was fresh in his mind, and that's why the symbiote took the form that it did.
Constant crusade to stop crime and get his alias laid.
Yes, I am aware that I am leaving out a character, but we're going to tackle him a little bit later. Anyway, let's take a look at ForceWorks, written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning, who worked on 2 previous books we've covered on this show, Legion Lost and Nova Annihilation, as well as creating the Guardians of the Galaxy lineup that was used for the popular series of movies. Now, I should point out that the first issue of ForceWorks is also going to include a little bit from an Ashcan preview issue that was done in black and white. It's going to look kind of strange. I mean, all of a sudden, we're going to go color to black and white to color. And, well, it just fills in a little minor story gap, so that's why I'm using it. Anyway, this is ForceWorks. Okay, we gotta talk about the Scarlet Witch's outfit here. Now, normally she's alternated between a more traditional superhero costume and an outfit more reminiscent of a Romani upbringing, but this, ooh, boy, yeah, this is way too revealing for any type of superhero activity. I mean, parts of the time it looks like she's about one sneeze away from a wardrobe malfunction, and the giant slits in the side of the dress, I mean, it just leads to a lot of really awkward situations, like this panel here, where about an eighth of the view is taken up by Wanda's exposed right butt cheek. Okay, I'm sure most of you are aware of the fact that at one point, the Vision and the Scarlet Witch used to be a romantic couple. An aspect of that relationship that you're probably not aware of, though, is that the Vision's creator actually mapped the brain of Wonder Man and put that mapping into the Vision's brain. To put it simply, the Vision's love for Wanda came from Simon Williams' love for Wanda. Now, at one point during the West Coast Avengers run, the Vision was actually deemed a threat by the United States government and disassembled. When the Avengers found and reactivated him, they needed to remap Simon's brain to put the feelings back in. However, Simon actually refused, believing he now had a shot at Wanda. She didn't take it too well. Okay, this being is called Century, and... No, Century, not Century. Anyway, Century was created by the 100 smartest people of a race called the Hodomorians. Unfortunately, not too long after being created, he was caught by an alien slave trafficker and had his memory completely wiped via a brain parasite. He was then sold to a parasitic world-devouring race called the Scatter to use as a scout. I should point out here that at no point does this team ever properly name itself ForceWorks. They just start calling themselves that in the second issue. I should point out that somewhere along the way, the group picked up an android called a recorder. Now, recorders are created by the people of the planet Rigel, and they work as sort of news documentarians for the denizens of that planet, going around from place to place, finding stories to send back to the planet Rigel. So now Sentry joins the team, effectively replacing Wonder Man. And if this lineup looks a little familiar to you, well, that's because if all you did was take out US Agent and replace him with Hawkeye, you would have the exact same lineup from the mid-90s Iron Man animated series. The only other real difference is that Wanda and Julia are not completely fawning over Tony all the time. Thankfully, Wanda is able to talk everyone down, and ForceWorks is escorted to the Sluranian Parliament building. Yeah, this was back when Tony Stark was still using the fact that Iron Man was his, quote, bodyguard to hide his identity, even though no one ever seemed to point out that Stark and his bodyguard were never in the same room at the exact same time. A government representative named Boschflor explains that Ember is the entity from the Dudakian folklore. Ember's assaults have gotten so bad that the Russian Black Brigade had to be enlisted for help. Now both ForceWorks and Black Brigade have to work together to stop Ember, after Sentry uses Parallax to track the deity's energy. The energy is traced to an old castle where the group counters Ember once more. Again, Wanda is able to use her native tongue to halt Ember, who reveals who he really is. A Dudakian historian named Pavel Chenklo. Chenklo was cataloging ancient items at the castle when he found a triptych which contained the soul of Ember. After realizing the damage Ember was causing, Chenklo returned to the castle to destroy the triptych and Ember in the process. However, before Chenklo can destroy the triptych, the Black Brigade attacks and blasts a hole in the floor. Both US Agent and Chenklo fall through. Spider-Woman manages to catch Agent, but Chenklo is gone. Scarlet Witch is incensed. Things could have ended peacefully, but Brigade just says all Dudak are the enemy and need to be destroyed. Iron Man then undermines Wanda and orders everyone to leave without any discussion. The threat level is dropped and ForceWorks is no longer needed. Both Wanda and US Agent disagree, but ForceWorks doesn't want to look gung-ho. But they're supposed to be proactive superheroes. Isn't the fact that they're proactive mean by their very nature they're also a little gung-ho? It just... Anyway, we're about to hit a little crossover here between ForceWorks, Iron Man, and War Machine. Now, the Iron Man and War Machine issues are not included in this, just the ForceWorks issues, but there are some bridging gaps that will allow us to at least fill the gaps into the story. Also, I should point out the relationship between Iron Man and War Machine, Tony Stark and Jim Rhodes, is strained after some events in which Tony Stark faked his death and Rhodes found out about it and was rather upset. The headquarters of the Hong Kong branch of Stark Enterprises are attacked by 4 elemental warriors. The warriors are minions of the Mandarin. A distress call is sent out to ForceWorks, but again, it seems to take a while for it to get heard, and something's delaying everything. Also, Iron Man is missing. That's because Iron Man and War Machine are being held hostage by the Mandarin. He's managed to infect both of their armors with viruses that have left both of them all but paralyzed. Soon after that, the Mandarin will unmask them and learn their identities. The first to be unmasked is War Machine. After that, the Mandarin begins electrocuting both men. Elsewhere, ForceWorks arrives in Hong Kong. Sentry manages to discern Iron Man's location and teleports without the others. He arrives in the Mandarin's chamber and Iron Man tells Sentry to protect Rhodey. Unfortunately, Mandarin blasts both Sentry and War Machine, and all that's left is Parallax and a pile of ashes. Okay, it's at this point that we leave ForceWorks and enter into the summary of events from War Machine issue number 9, Iron Man issue number 312, and Marvel Comics presents issues 169 to 172. In reality, War Machine and Sentry were teleported miles away to a small village. Sentry tries to modify Rhodey's armor, only to suddenly be shocked as his memories begin returning to him. ForceWorks manages to locate Iron Man, but the Mandarin's fortress has an energy shield protecting it, causing the Hexjet to be damaged in the process. Also, the Mandarin rips off all of Tony's armor and prepares to deliver the final blow. And now back to ForceWorks. Spider-Woman and U.S. Agent fight their way into the stronghold via a subterranean tunnel. Scarlet Witch, on the other hand, has used her powers to hone in on Tony and comes crashing into the chamber through a skylight. She blasts the Mandarin back and tries to leave with Tony. Meanwhile, War Machine has managed to assemble a small army in the village. Unfortunately, Sentry is still loopy as he's suddenly remembering an old nursery rhyme from his childhood. Back at the fortress, Wanda and Tony are reunited with U.S. Agent and Spider-Woman as the Mandarin begins bearing down on them. Wanda uses her abilities to redirect the Mandarin's attack back at him, resulting in a large explosion. Unfortunately, the Mandarin not only survives the process, but Parallax gets left behind as well. As the others exit the castle, they're greeted by the sight of Rhodey, Sentry, and their assembled army arriving at the castle. Nothing too much to say here, except, of course, in the next issues of War Machine and Iron Man, they overthrow the Mandarin and the Sentry returns back to normal once Parallax is in his possession again. Also, Tony and Rhodey make peace and renew their friendship. It's Christmas time at the works, and Tony Stark is holding a get-together for several friends and contemporaries. Julia and Rachel are decorating the tree, and U.S. Agent is whipping up some eggnog. Oh yeah, this isn't awkward at all. I mean, it's not like any member of ForceWorks happens to be a recovering alcoholic. Also, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that two of the guests at this party are Happy Hogan and Pepper Potts, who are at this point married. And yes, I know what the movies say about Tony and Pepper, but still, at this point she was married to Happy Hogan. As the guests begin to arrive, Tony is nervous and a little upset as Rhodey can't come due to work. He's trying to heal some old wounds, and the fact that not all the West Coast Avengers are here is troubling. Wanda assures Tony that everything is going to be fine as Captain America also arrives. However, not all is well, as Sentry is still dealing with his memories returning. They strike him like a migraine and cause great pain. The most recent one is more painful than anything else, as he remembers the faces of a wife and child, but not their names. As the party begins to wrap up, Tony addresses the West Coast Avengers. He formally apologizes for the shenanigans he pulled, including faking his death, and invites them all for Wonder Man's memorial service the next week. He then makes a couple of jokes about Hawkeye, who's conspicuous in his absence. Except it turns out that Hawkeye actually is at the compound. U.S. Agent smuggled him in as a surprise. Incensed that Stark never really respected him, Hawkeye storms off. However, if he had stayed just a little bit longer, Clint would have realized that Tony thinks of him as the heart and soul of the Avengers. Still, the others accept the apology, though Wanda has some concerns. Okay, now technically the funeral for Wonder Man is covered in the next two issues. It's just for some reason covered as a backup story to the main story, which is ForceWorks' adventure in Australia. I don't know why they did this. I think it makes more narrative sense just to have it be its own issue. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be covering the funeral for Wonder Man as its own issue, and then we're going to jump back in and cover the A story for the next two issues. The day of Simon Williams' funeral has arrived, and it's taking a toll on everyone. They have been ignoring their grief until now, and Sentry isn't sure if he actually wants to attend as he talks with Amanda Cheney, the PR representative for Stark Enterprises. He feels that he is to blame for Simon's death, and his presence at the funeral will just leave everyone feeling awkward. Wanda and Julia talk about Julie remaining on the team. Julia is unique in the sense that she is a single mother, and, well, no one would blame her if she just wanted to raise her kid and no longer have her life constantly being in danger.
But Julia says that Rachel is the reason that she's on the team and she has no intention of leaving. Happy Hogan then arrives to take everyone to the funeral, with Sentry still feeling out of place, so he just looks on from afar. But Amanda Chaney points out that he's proven his worth multiple times and everyone knows that he's not really responsible for Simon's death. Still, it's a solemn ride home back to the works as everyone is having a moment of reflection, not only of Wonder Man, but of others lost. Wanda of her twins and the symbolic loss of the Vision's mind, Julia of her ex-husband Larry, U.S. agent of his brother and parents, Tony of his missing girlfriend Veronica Benning. Though these feelings do come to pass as the sun begins to set in the distance.
Okay, this is where we cover the A plot from those two issues that the Wonder Man story was the backup to.
In Queensland, Australia, two police officers named Barry and Willie, the latter of whom is Aboriginal, are out on late-night patrol. It's then that a crazy inebriated man leaps onto their vehicle claiming to be running from a horde of monsters. This claim soon proves to be justified. Forceworks is alerted to the situation, however, not only is the message once more oddly delayed, but they also receive the wrong coordinates, sending them about 1,000 miles south of where they need to be. Thankfully, their radio picks up Barry's distress call as they arrive to take on the strange beasts. Sentry uses Parallax to scan the monsters, which appear to be made of tangibly manifested dream material. The monsters are so strong that the weapons in Iron Man and U.S. Agent's armor actually feed them rather than harm them. It's then that Willie appears decked out in native tribal garb to subdue the creatures via boomerang. Forceworks and Willie then spot the drunk from before being surrounded by the monsters. Piecing together that he's responsible, Spider-Woman ensnares the man in a psychic web, allowing Iron Man to inject him with a shot of adrenaline. The monsters soon vanish. The man's name is Alf Robbins, and he recently robbed a bank with another man named Shane Mundy. Willie remembered growing up with tribal legends about dreams becoming reality, and asks if Alf was anywhere near Gowonga Gorge, otherwise known as the Dreaming Country. Alf and Shane did flee to the Dreaming Country after the robbery, where Shane vanished. The group also gets a report about people who were sleeping when the attack occurred not having woken up, as if they were in some type of coma. Forceworks bring Willie and Alf out to the Dream Country to investigate as Alf begins to elaborate on what happened with Shane. The two encountered a shaman-esque individual who could make monsters appear. Shane killed the man and the two now killers went to sleep for the night. Alf woke up to find a strange light emanating from Shane's body, which was now dead. It's then that everything comes to a sudden halt when the group is attacked by a giant glowing pink skeleton. Willie comes to in prehistoric times being psychically contacted by a being known as Orphan. Orphan is an alien entity that crashed Earth millions of years ago and wound up in a coma. Orphan woke up when Willie's ancestors discovered him, and Orphan has been protected by his tribe ever since. Any person that rests near Orphan's location can tap into the being's power. Now Shane Mundy has tapped into Orphan's ability. Willie tries to reason with Orphan that Shane is not a good person and thus should not be allowed to tap into Orphan's power, but the next thing Willie knows, he's stuck back in the present, and Alf has been killed. Meanwhile, the Forceworks team has been trapped in their own nightmares. Iron Man is being subdued by some type of techno-organic entity. Spider-Woman sees her daughter being overrun by the Scatter. Sentry is being haunted by dark versions of himself. Wanda is losing control of the team to Iron Man, much to the others' delight. And U.S. Agent is once more a small child being attacked by a monster in the closet. However, Agent quickly realizes he's in a dream and begins fighting the monster on his way out. It's enough to cause everyone to snap out of their dreams and be reunited with Willie. Willie then directs everyone to Orphan's resting place. They find that Shane is waiting for them there. U.S. Agent and Spider-Woman manage to fight through Shane's defenses and locate the criminal's body. Orphan then reads the minds of both heroes and realizes that yes, Shane was indeed a bad guy, so Orphan kills him. Afterwards, Willie decides to stay behind and work with Orphan to better understand the Earth, so something like this will never happen again. He's also made an honorary member of Forceworks.
Okay, our next two issues, we're going back to Slorania because of a minor crossover with War Machine in which he noticed that there was some ethnic cleansing going on between the Sloranians and the Dudaks.
A group of Black Brigade drones attack a Dudak village. The villagers have no defense against their attackers, so they are forced to flee. Amongst the group are an undercover Scarlet Witch and U.S. Agent. Agent wants to fight, but Wanda reminds him that this is strictly reconnaissance. Meanwhile, Tony Stark is at the Sloranian Parliament under the guise of looking to set up a possible arms deal. Of course, this is just to cover for Stark's assistant, Julia, to root out any possible wrongdoings. Sentry is acting as a relay while Recorder watches. Stark is upset, thinking the team was already done with Slorania, but Spider-Woman points out that this was Wanda's idea and that she's in charge of the group. Back with the Dudak, Wanda and Agent talk with an aid worker named Dr. Renko. Renko explains that the conflict between the Dudak and the Sloreen is generations old. Ember was the deity for the Dudak, but the Sloreen actually have a war deity of their own.
Now, I would say the name of Ember's rival, aka the Sloranian war god, but I don't know how to pronounce this word. Volkovic?
The power struggle itself has been so long that whomever wields a majority becomes a tyrannical and bloodthirsty individual. It is then that the settlement is under attack by the Targoth, who are undead Sloranian soldiers. Once more, Agent wants to fight, but Wanda continues to tell him to stand down, causing the three to be taken hostage. Spider-Woman continues her search for dirt on the Sloranian government, only for the Sloranian Prime Minister, who it turns out is actually their war god, to capture her. Julia sends out a distress call to Sentry, but he's unconscious and the recorder is holding a wrench.
So yeah, the whole reason ForceWorks keep getting these weird delayed messages about the warnings and the emergencies that they're trying to be proactive in preventing, it's because of the machinations of the recorder, who's apparently trying to raise his television ratings. I think. I'm not too sure. All I can tell you is that they planted this like it's some sort of big reveal, except they've been showing him doing this throughout the whole series. I've been doing a better job keeping it a secret in my review version.
Tony manages to get Julia's distress call before Recorder sends a block and prepares to leap into action as Iron Man, only to be attacked by the Black Brigade. Meanwhile, the Dudakian hostage train is halted by Ember. Ember's appearance is enough for Scarlet Witch and U.S. Agent to leap into action. Wanda tries to reason with Ember, believing Chinklo to still be inside, but the being just begins charging towards the facility the hostage train was headed towards. Renko follows, knowing the only way for peace to be achieved is for both war gods to die. Meanwhile, the Sloranian leader has strapped Spider-Woman to a machine that will drain her of her life energy and that of several other Dudakians. The energy will then be transferred to replenish his own. Just as he switches on the machine, Ember comes crashing through the wall. Scarlet Witch frees Spider-Woman, who has already lost a significant amount of energy. Back on the Hex ship, Sentry begins to come to. He confronts Recorder only for the recording android to attack him. This proves to be quite foolish, as Sentry soon decapitates Recorder with Parallax. As this is happening, Iron Man takes down Black Brigade. However, the Brigade armor is connected directly into the life system of the man inside, forcing Tony to have to re-engineer it in order to save the soldier within. Wanda, Renko, and U.S. Agent begin working on the energy-draining machine while Ember begins siphoning the life energy from the Sloranian leader. Ember eventually triumphs, but Renko points out that once more, for peace to be achieved, both deities must die. Iron Man and Sentry then arrive to help maneuver Ember into the life energy drainer. With nowhere for the energy to be dispersed, the facility ends up exploding. Over the next few weeks, the Sloranians and the Dudaks begin taking formal steps towards peace and a cooperative government. Meanwhile, ForceWorks decide to leave the Recorder in the subterranean super prison called the Vault.
The Vault, coincidentally enough, is where the Kree Centurions from the beginning of this collection were sent to. Also, I should point out, the Vault should not be confused with S.H.I.E.L.D.'s other Supermax penitentiary, the Raft, which you may remember from the first story arc of New Avengers.
Wanda gets struck with a third migraine in as many days while trying to talk with U.S. Agent and Iron Man. Not only that, but ForceWorks has gotten a stress call from the Vault. Something has taken over the control of the central computer system and locked everyone out. This has allowed the Kree prisoners to mount an escape attack. Sentry manages to teleport to the facility with ForceWorks not too far behind. They quickly crush the rebellion and the Warden thanks the Avengers, even though this is ForceWorks, not technically the Avengers. But everyone wants to find out what exactly happened. Sentry teleports into the central computer mainframe with Iron Man monitoring the situation. It doesn't take too long to find the mastermind behind everything. It's the Recorder. It turns out he has the ability to self-repair. Sentry takes him down again, and another two groups arrive. The first being the Avengers team of Black Widow, Hercules, Quicksilver, Crystal, and Hank Pym. They're here to turn over the Kree for extradition to a second group, the Skrulls. Wanda is aghast at the notion that the Avengers would ever strike a deal with the bloodthirsty Skrulls, let alone a deal like this. However, the Skrulls aren't the only race involved, they just happen to be the most prominent. On top of all of that, a small group of Kree have managed to actually get out of the vault and hit the weapons depot. Also, a Rigelian representative has arrived to figure out what the hell is going on with the Recorder. ForceWorks and the Avengers are forced to work together to bring in the Kree. A team of Iron Man, U.S. Agent, Quicksilver, Crystal, and Hercules go after the Kree. Back with the others, Widow explains to Wanda and Julia that the Kree's military incursions recently have created an inordinate amount of refugees. In other words, the extradition actually does have a point. The Avengers ForceWorks team taking on the Kree have their hands full, but they start managing to turn things around just when the Skrulls arrive. As the Skrull and Earth forces begin arguing, the Kree mysteriously teleport away. It turns out the Recorder has been reactivated again, and killed his Rigelian mechanic. The recorder goes on to explain as he's taken over the teleporter and brought the Kree on board. But Wanda ends things by quickly causing the Kree weapons to backfire. She and Sentry then go after Recorder. She then hyper-ages the android into obsolescence. Afterwards, the extradition takes place and the Avengers and ForceWorks team make peace. Sometime later, U.S. Agent is out for a joyride in Ventura when he spots a massive ship flying overhead. The ship is headed towards the works, and with that, Agent takes off. He uses the air ducts to sneak into the facility, much like Hawkeye did over Christmas. Inside, he spots Stark employees Fisher Todd and Amanda Chaney being taken away in suspended animation pods. Also, Rachel Carpenter and her nanny Consuela have been grabbed as well. A check of the security system reveals footage of Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Scarlet Witch getting abducted. Agent then looks up footage of the Sentry, who appears to have recognized the invaders before they jumped him. The invaders then grab U.S. Agent. Thankfully, help arrives in the form of the Sentry, who teleports Agent to safety.
Yes, these aliens are in the employ of the Broker. That's the alien slave trafficker who wiped the Sentry's memory and sold him to the Scatter. The Broker employs this brain parasite that he attaches to his underlings, and then he controls that brain parasite with a special bracelet around his right arm.
The Broker has an offer for the U.S. Agent. Sentry in exchange for the others. However, this turns out to be a ruse by the ForceWorks duo, as Sentry chops off the bracelet that controls the parasites with Parallax. Now that they're free, the Broker's former underlings hold a little mutiny. It's going to take a while for the other ForceWorks members to be fully revived, so Sentry asks Agent to say goodbye to everyone, Wanda in particular, as he's leaving with the former underlings to try to locate all of their respective homeworlds.
Okay, our last story is actually called Sentry Distant Suns, and like I said, it follows the Sentry and also gives a little bit of his backstory, which I've already given already, so I hope you don't mind if I just try to condense this down as much as I possibly can.
Sentry is out leading the crew trying to find the respective homeworlds. They haven't really turned up anything, and one, Skewer, knows there isn't anything for him to go back to, as his homeworld was destroyed by the Scatter. Meanwhile, the Broker is being held in the brig so the Sentry can try to use him for information on where these planets are located. However, it turns out the Broker had a contingency plan in the form of Slug, one of the underlings. Broker had Slug pick up several new parasites and place them on everyone else. It turns out the Broker also had a backup bracelet to control everyone. Everyone then all gangs up on Sentry as Broker lets slip to Skewer that Sentry led the Scatter to his home planet. The Broker then makes a deal with Lore, the one the Sentry was created to seek out and kill. Lore has another need for Sentry as well as Parallax. She needs the staff's dimensional tracking abilities to track down a powerful civilization and steal its great treasure. However, unbeknownst to Lore, the Broker also wants in on the treasure and is secretly tracking her crew.
Whew, boy. Everyone's going to have such egg on their faces once they realize the treasure is just a stone that says peace on earth underneath it.
Sentry does as he's ordered, and the group is soon in the stronghold of a woman named Azimuth. Azimuth knows of the Sentry and his past, but she doesn't trust Lore. Lore then kills Azimuth, and it's then that the Broker arrives. Unbeknownst to the Broker, Slug has overridden the parasite just enough to destroy the console powering the bracelet and dies in the process. With that, Skewer stabs the one who destroyed his people, the Broker. But the Broker does still have a backup plan. He pulls out a gun and kills most of his underlings, except for Skewer, but it's then that the Broker gets decapitated by the Sentry and Parallax. Sentry, along with Skewer and the surviving underlings, set course back home, by which I mean Earth. Sentry needs to get back to the one he loves, Wanda Maximoff.
That concludes this collection of ForceWorks. Now, the series itself actually ended at issue 22, but most of those are part of another event storyline called The Crossing, and we really do not need to talk anything about that. Although they did finally give the Scarlet Witch some leggings for her costume. Anyway, how was ForceWorks? Well, it's not very good, unfortunately. I mean, there are some plus sides to that. I did like Wanda as the leader of a team. I think she more than handled herself well. If that character is written well, she is more than capable of doing something like this. I'd like to see her lead another team, like an Avengers team or a team of mutants or something of that nature. I think it would actually work out pretty well. Also, there were a couple of good issues in this. I think the Christmas storyline and the Wonder Man Memorial story are really well done. They're good, decent little character studies. I think they got a good job of conveying emotions and getting the characters well represented. And the artwork really does improve as the series goes on. It does start out kind of 90s, and trust me, we'll talk a bit about that. But like I said, it does improve. It does get a little bit more palatable. That being said, like I said, it's very 90s in the start, at least early on. Like I said, you have the Scarlet Witch's costume, which is ugh. Also, the digital transfer for this is really, really bad. This is a digital comic I purchased on Comixology, and there's these weird scan lines that just keep appearing all over the place. It just looks really, really ugly. And I know I complained about the Scarlet Witch's fashion, but Spider-Woman doesn't get that much of a break either. I mean, half the time she seems to want to wear workout clothes over her costume, and I just don't understand. If you wanted to train in her costume, fine. If you wanted her to train in workout clothes, fine. Why is she in both at the same time? Ugh. Not to mention, there's way too many crossovers going on. Like I said, the Hands of the Mandarin storyline really, that's the whole Iron Man, War Machine, Force Works, Marvel Presents thing, and it really, really does not need to be in this. I think, I think they did this because, again, they're trying to promote Abnett and Lanning, who did Guardians of the Galaxy, and they're trying to say, hey, like, these guys did this as well, maybe you'd be interested in it. And admittedly, that did kind of pique my interest. So, yeah, but it's just, maybe if this had been like the first 7 issues, or 7 or 8 issues, I can't remember which, just covered the Scatter and then Slorania, I think it would have worked a lot better. You didn't need to collect 15 issues into this. It's just way, way, way too much. And also, characters like Sentry is just dull. He's just constantly kind of being crammed down our throats. I mean, the last storyline is all him, and it's just so boring and repetitive. It really didn't need to be in here at all either. And unfortunately, I would say characters like U.S. Agent and Spider-Woman really get underutilized. They don't feel like they're really part of the team at all, except, just to be sort of plot points at certain points. And, well, it's because of that I do have to give Force Works an F. With that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Hey guys, got a request for the show? Check out my Patreon at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions. And if you like the video, give it a like, share it, subscribe, and ring that notification bell.